Look inside a modern hospital, specifically at an MRI machine, peering into the human body without a single incision. This technology, along with the smartphone in your pocket and the fiber optic cables powering the internet, relies entirely on one desperate mathematical guess made over a century ago. The physicist who made that guess was Max Planck. He never intended to start a scientific revolution, yet he ended up providing the tools that would eventually dismantle the established laws of nature. Planck spent his life searching for absolute, unbroken certainty. It is a sharp historical irony that a man obsessed with perfect mathematical order accidentally proved the universe is built on a grainy, discontinuous reality that defies classical logic. Planck believed the universe operated like a flawless machine. For him, the laws of physics were as predictable and synchronized as turning gears, where every cause led to a clean, measurable effect. But in the 1890s, a problem emerged regarding how heated objects emit light, like a blacksmith's iron glowing red, then white as it gets hotter. When physicists tried to measure this process using the laws of the time, the math completely collapsed. This chart shows the failure. The line shooting infinitely upwards represents the classical prediction that any hot object should radiate an infinite amount of high-frequency energy. The curve peaking and dropping off is what actually happens in reality. This massive gap represented a total collapse of classical law. To Planck, this suggested that the perfect, predictable order he had spent his life defending was an illusion. By December 1900, Planck was exhausted. He had spent months trying to solve this puzzle, and late one night he made a desperate mathematical assumption just to force his failing equations to align with the real-world data. To make the math work, he proposed that energy does not flow in a smooth, continuous wave. Instead, it is dispensed in tiny, separate packets, or fixed units, which he called quanta. 5 years later, Albert Einstein took this idea and proved it was more than just a calculation trick. Light itself travels in these separate packets, meaning reality is not smooth, it is quantized. Planck did not celebrate. He spent the next several years trying to undiscover his own theory, desperately attempting to find a way to fit these quanta back into the safe, predictable framework of the old world. Every attempt failed. In his effort to preserve the math of the 19th century, Planck had accidentally replaced it with a new physics of discrete units and probability, a reality he personally found deeply unsettling. Just as his profound scientific certainty completely fractured, Planck's strictly disciplined personal life met an equally violent and unpredictable collapse. First, his wife Marie died from illness. A few years later, the First World War broke out, claiming his son Karl in the trenches. The losses compounded when both of his daughters, Grete and Emma, died in childbirth just years apart. By the height of the Second World War, his closest surviving son, Erwin, was arrested and implicated in the 1944 plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler. At 86 years old, the proud scientist was forced to write a desperate letter to the dictator, pleading for his son's life on the strength of his own service to Germany. The reply never came. Erwin was executed in January 1945. The man who sought mathematical perfection in the stars was left powerless against the senseless brutality of human history. In 1945, American forces advancing through a destroyed Germany discovered an 87-year-old Planck. He was weak and alone, surviving amid the total annihilation of his country. Having lost his wife, his children, his home, and his scientific worldview, Planck did something unexpected. He stood back up and began to lecture again in the rubble. In his final years, he acknowledged that the events of his life were entirely out of his control, yet he maintained his belief that there is meaning hidden somewhere beneath the chaos. That single desperate calculation in 1900 would eventually provide the foundation for nearly every technological advancement of the 20th century, from the transistor to the laser. Planck's story suggests that true resilience does not require a perfectly predictable universe. It only requires the stoic strength to keep walking forward, even after the truth destroys everything you thought you knew.